between Will Eisner and Harvey Kurtzman. Harvey hasn't joined us yet, but for those who don't know, and I can't believe you don't, this is Will Eisner. He probably won't be conversing with Harvey until Harvey walks in the door, but we can still
talk to him anyhow.
That's right. That's right. Because you know what you would have said to him. Unless Will objects, I wouldn't mind keeping this fairly open to questions from people in the audience also.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I would prefer to think that you would rather hear your own questions answered than hear me come up with questions for you. Doing homework, knowing that this is the only panel I knew of for sure I was going to be sitting on, I tried to make some kind of a general list of what these two fellows have done. Of course, I gave it up. It soon became something like Gone with the Wind. It was interesting to note that between the year, if you add the years that Will has put in the business, the years that Harvey has put into the business, we're talking about a cumulative effect of over 90 years of comic book history, of the comic book business. In fact, Will and I were just talking about the fact that history supplies certain needs which then are filled by individuals. And we may have been talking on perhaps a more grandiose scale than what we're going to talk about this morning, but I think that Will and Harvey very much represent a case of just that thing. Comic books were just a fledgling business when Will started, and I do have little notes here, Will, and all your dates and everything, but his first paid comics work was 1936. There hadn't been too much in the way of comic books in the way we think of them at that point. Will was there at the beginning when that happened. Harvey came along in the following decade, and of course he filled another need that perhaps people hadn't really realized they needed until he began to fill it with his mad work and even some of the material he was doing for the EC War magazines. Will, with a spirit, set up traditions, ideas that people are still mining to this day. They're still following the path that Will Eisner blazed, just as many of them are following the separate path that Harvey blazed. I find that very interesting that there are two, that if Harvey joins us, we're going to be talking to two men who are equally second to none in what they have done. There are also some parallels in their careers I hope we can talk about a bit. Will and Harvey both began in the early phases of their careers doing superhero work, and then, as well, you did Uncle Sam, but you also did Wonder Man, which I hope you'll talk about for a minute. And Harvey did things like Magno and Davy for Fiction House, and then they quickly found their own paths that they wanted to take. They got out of the mainstream immediately and formed basically their own personal genres. Harvey and Will have produced some of the most well-respected material in the business. They've worked for some of the most unscrupulous people at one point or another in the business, and yet they managed to come out untarnished and undiminished by the associations that they've made. And I think rather than just go on like that, I find those parallels rather interesting, considering how diverse the end product is for both men. So if there are any questions you'd like to throw out at this point for Will Eisner, I think that we'd be glad to entertain them here right at the beginning.
When did you go into teaching?
I began teaching formally in 1974, I believe, at the School of Visual Arts. It's interesting you should ask that question quite that way. Did everybody hear the question? When did I go into teaching?
Yeah, go back. I didn't realize you did Uncle Sam. I forgot completely about it. It was one I loved when I was one of those little bitty kids.
I can't believe you were ever a little bitty kid. As a matter of fact, I don't want to believe it. Well, when he said, when I began teaching, actually, when I was asked by Silas Rhodes, who was then the president chairman of the School of Visual Arts, would I teach there? At first I refused. I demurred. I said I wasn't really a good teacher. I didn't think of myself as a teacher. And he said, that's not true. He said, as long as I've known you, your studio or shop has been you've been teaching in your shops. And I realized then that's exactly what I would do. As a matter of fact, in the course of a lot of conversations I've had here, answering questions about the composition of my studio and the shop and the kind of people, I realized that that's exactly what I had to do in order to survive. The early Eisner and Iger studios, I was recruiting people from diverse fields. Lou Fine came from illustration. Alex Bloom was a muralist. Dick Kiefer was a children's book woodcut illustrator. LeBlanc, of course, but Nordling was a Finnish caricaturist who was doing plays for the Finnish language community, and there was no school before that. There was no, so I did teach. So when I was asked to teach, as I say, I was shocked because I'd always believed them who can does, them who can't teach. Anyway, that was when I began teaching. I still do it, and I enjoy it very much. I think for me, that classroom was a window to the world. It's one of the reasons I come to conventions, candidly, is because it keeps me in touch with what's going on. I sort of like a vampire. I kind of feed off the curiosity and the enthusiasm of the people at the forefront of this generation. You have no idea how exciting it is to see the vibrancy and the growth of this industry, to find guys like Jim or the Hernandez boys and people like that or Alan Moore, people who of a caliber who would not really identify with comics in the 30s and 40s because they were not related to it. It was not worth their attention. To see this field growing and becoming vibrant and to feel somehow part of it or want to feel part of it is for me the exciting thing. That's really where I'm at. In case you ever wondered why I gave up a nice comfortable studio at Florida to come up with a place like Dallas and run around with a badge on my shoulder answering a lot of questions. That's the reason. I'm sorry I cut you off in the past by questioning your youth.
Oh, I was just Uncle Sam is such a stuffy idea, and you made it so vital. Was that your idea that back then?
Yeah. Remember it was a superhero time. We didn't call it superhero, we called them costume characters. But just as I was talking with Jim here a moment ago about the fact that the need exists or the climate exists and what happens is a human response to it, that was part of the pattern of what created Superman. Indeed, prior to that, what created Tarzan and all the superheroes throughout history. I did some research because I gave a talk some time ago to Brandeis, the other university in New York, on relationship with the biblical heroes and superheroes. And I tried, one of the best ways to learn about something is to try and respond to an offer to give a talk, and then you got to do some research and you learn something. Up to that point, I didn't know damn thing about. But Superman, I believe, was created as almost a visceral response to a need the society had at a moment in its cultural history when it was confronted by a superhero, a supervillainic force, or Superman force, which was Hitler. And there was only one way of dealing with it, is by creating a superhero. So Uncle Sam was just part of my groping for the need for superheroes at the time. At this point in my life, I would no more think of creating a group called Black Hawk than I would eulogize a skinhead group. It'd just be foreign to my thinking at this time. But at that time, it seemed very suitable to my thinking. Very fascist idea in itself, but it was appropriate to the time, just as Ebony was appropriate to the time. You respond to what's going on. Uncle Sam was a public domain character that represented a heroic part of our past, and so I selected him as a good. As far as investing characters with anything, that investment comes, again, viscerally, comes out of yourself. Harvey's creation of Mad was not a scientific thing, I'm certain. Although if he were here, he'd probably confirm that, I hope. But it was a response to something. See, I knew Harvey before he got to Mad. He was doing a thing called Hey Look for
Remarkable, timely.
No, he did that before that, even for the Herald Tribune. It was a thing, and he did a little piece in the
He had a
Herald
different
Tribune.
title on it, yeah, that's what it was, Silver Linings.
Well, I don't know what it was called. He would remember. It was a little very fun. It really blew your mind. It was way out, very, very avant-garde comedy. And Harvey, matter of fact, that's how I first met Harvey. He was up to see me in my studio, my shop. The question of getting a job or doing some work. Here he is now. Harvey, all you have to do now is deny what we've said.
I deny it all. Sorry.
You're not gonna like finding out what you denied.
We're just talking about you.
What are you supposed to? It says so on the program.
We're supposed to talk to you.
Now then.
Anyway, it was a long, rambling answer to a short question.
That's what we want.
Dick?
It seems to me that in the early days of comics, the people creating them were very, very heavily ethnic people. Lots and lots of Jewish people, some Italians, the names that you've mentioned. And yet the product seemed to be almost pure wasp. I mean, think of Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne and Alan Scott, all these absolutely white-bread, generic American-type people. Would you address that odd contrast?
Yes. First of all, I'll address it with one word: assimilation. Nothing that an ethnic person coming into America wants more than assimilation. There's nothing he wants more than assimilation. The Jew that seemed to dominate the scene in comics early was a result purely, I believe, of a need meeting opportunity. The comic book business was a raw, open, unestablished area. And the young Jew at that time in the city, or the young ethnic, the Italian and so forth, were looking for places, for opportunities to go, just as in later years other ethnic groups moved into sports and film. Sports and film and theater always provide an opportunity, the gateway for ethnic groups traditionally in American society. They're the very easiest places for them to enter. The fact that the young Jew working in comics at the time created his characters as a white-bread wasp, gave them American italics names, was part of what he felt was the accepted cultural norm. He sometimes didn't get away with it. I think it was Jules Pfeiffer claimed that the spirit was really Jewish, despite the name.
Well,
Did he
was
say
he?
why?
You should know.
I never asked. He always denied it. He always denied it. He looked like he could pass. He changed his name, straightened his nose. But that's my sociological reason. But I don't know, Harvey, you